All right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Weather School. We're live. We're in the KHOU Weather Center on a warm, little bit of a breezy day out there. I got a southeast breeze. The humidity's coming up. This is going to lead to a chance for rain and thunder tomorrow, especially tomorrow afternoon and evening. So we'll be talking about that at 4 o'clock. Erica Lopez is here getting that forecast prepared right now. So rain. In order to get clouds to form and for clouds to grow and make rain, you need something very, very special and particular for the clouds, for the raindrops to form on, for the cloud droplets to form on. They need to form on something other than just themselves. And that something that raindrops and cloud droplets form on is called condensation nuclei. Condensation nuclei. What in the world is that? These are tiny, tiny microscopic particles, and they're floating around all over the place right now. Here, take a deep breath. Okay, you're breathing in. What are you breathing in? So there's oxygen, there's nitrogen. It's mostly nitrogen. There's a little bit of CO2. There are other trace gases, argon, blah, blah, blah. There's water vapor. You're breathing in water. You can't see it. It's invisible because it's in gas form. You're also breathing in microscopic particles of dust. That's one of the things you're breathing in. So breathe in. So you're breathing in a whole lot of interesting things besides just the oxygen that your lungs take and separate and get into your bloodstream and help us live. So condensation nuclei, it's microscopic little particles. Water vapor in its gas form will settle on these microscopic particles. Come on, Ben. There we go. Water vapor, gas, it's invisible. It's all around us. Will settle on these particles, and as it does, it will condense. In other words, it will change phase. It will go from H2O in a vapor form, which is invisible, to H2O into a liquid form. So from vapor to liquid, it's changing its phase, changing its state. And it's very interesting, whenever water vapor changes state, when it goes from a gas to a liquid, it releases heat. It gives off a little bit of heat. It's called latent heat. That helps storms grow. So the more you can get the gas, water vapor, to condense and change its phase into a liquid, the more you can have that happen, the more heat is released. And as you know, heat rises, and so the more that condensation process happens, the more heat's released, it rises, and you get storms bubbling up into the atmosphere. So you need lots and lots of condensation and lots of condensation nuclei to release that heat and get storms to grow. So condensation nuclei. Now, what about more on condensation nuclei? When you look down at planet Earth from outer space, you can see water. So the lower level clouds are liquid water. They're clouds that are like puffy cumulus clouds. They're made out of liquid. The higher clouds, see these how they look kind of like a sheet? Those are ice crystals. Those are cirrus clouds. So you've got liquid water, you've got solid water, and then what about the in-between where there's nothing, where there's just open space? Well, there's water vapor there. It's vapor. It's a gas. So we can see water in all three of its states here from outer space. Liquid, the low-level clouds, and of course the ocean. Solid, the ice crystals floating way up there at 34,000 feet. And then there's vapor all over the place. Now what about this water vapor? All right. So I'll prove to you. Whenever you breathe in, you're breathing in water. So breathe in. And then maybe if you have glasses, or maybe mom and dad have glasses, then just, you've done this before, fog up your glasses, breathe out on them. So there it is. There's the liquid water that you were breathing in and breathing back out. And it condenses. It goes from an invisible vapor to actual liquid water by settling on a surface. It helps if that surface is cooler. In fact, the colder the surface, the quicker the condensation happens, and more on that in just a second. But that's the water vapor you're breathing in. It's all around you. Kind of cool. Next slide, please. There we go. Okay, so condensation nuclei. So we need these tiny little dust particles for that vapor to settle on and condense and change its phase from vapor to liquid. And up until the 70s, scientists, we all thought that almost all condensation nuclei was dust particles in aerosol form, microscopic dust. And a lot of that dust came from here, Africa, West Africa, the Sahara Desert. This is an animation from NASA of a cloud of dust coming off the west coast of Africa. That dust travels across the Atlantic Ocean. Here's the United States, there's Florida, here's South America. But that dust, eventually, some of it becomes condensation nuclei for thunderstorms that might bubble up here in Houston. And it was thought that almost all condensation nuclei was dust, tiny little bits of rock. And here's how the condensation process works. You've got water molecules. Each one of these dots is a molecule of H2O in vapor form. Okay, it's invisible. We're talking about molecules the size 1/10,000th of a micron in diameter. So that's water in a gas form. This big brown thing down here is a piece of dust. Still microscopic, but you can see how much bigger it is than the vapor that is the water vapor here at the moment here. It's 1 micron across. But that's all it takes. One little dust particle, this brown thing is a particle of microscopic dust, and these even smaller little water vapor particles, they touch it, come in contact with it, and especially if that little piece of dust is cooler than the water vapor around it, it will condense, and you see right here it's become a little liquid. It's becoming liquid on the surface of that piece of dust. So that's the condensation process taking place. We're going from a gas, vapor, to a liquid particle on the surface of the condensation nucleus. So this is a raindrop this is a cloud droplet in the process of forming. And if it gets big enough, it becomes a raindrop and it'll fall to the ground. So that's forming liquid water. And I mentioned how the condensation nuclei, this piece of dust, it helps if it's cooler. You've pulled out a can of Coke from the fridge and it's cold and it begins to drip. Well, that's water vapor condensing on that cold can of soda, and the vapor is becoming a liquid on the surface of the can. If you have a warm can of soda and you put it down, not much happens, but if it's cold, you get a lot of condensation. So it helps if it's cold. It helps even better if it's ice, if it's below freezing. That really, really speeds up the condensation process. There's a different type of condensation nuclei that was discovered in the 1970s. It was actually theorized for a long time. And it's this. What is this? These are petri dishes. That's bacteria. These are colonies of bacteria in a petri dish, something you might see in a laboratory. Here it is under a microscope. These are single pieces of bacteria, a single-celled organism under high magnification. And in particular, this bacteria right here has a name, Pseudomonas syringae. Thank you, Wikipedia, for the image. So this is one piece of Pseudomonas syringae, I hope I'm saying that right, bacteria. It's a single-celled organism. It turns out that this bacteria is floating around all over the place. Breathe in again. You probably breathed in some Pseudomonas syringae bacteria. It's okay. You've got mucus in your nose, and you've got snot, and you've got your lungs coated in mucus, and you've got an immune system, and it takes care of all that bacteria, protects you from it. But this Pseudomonas syringae bacteria is alive. It's a single-celled organism, one of the most basic organisms on the planet, one of the most ancient creatures on planet Earth. Well, it's got to live, and to live, it has to eat. How is this leading to rainfall? I'm going to show you here in just a second how this is all connected. So how does that bacteria eat? Well, it lives on plants. It lives on the surface of a plant, and it wants to eat the soft juices inside the plant, inside of a plant leaf or the stem. But it cannot get to those soft juices inside the plant cells because it doesn't have any way of breaking open the cell wall of a plant cell. You got to break open those cell walls so the bacteria can get in there and eat on the soft membranes inside the cell walls inside of a plant. So what does it do? Well, this bacteria has a very special, incredible ability. It can take a it has the ability to encourage the formation of ice crystals. It encourages the formation of ice crystals. And this is a picture of frost on a plant. Now, how does it do that? It turns out at even higher magnifications, Pseudomonas syringae has a lattice formation on its surface, like a lattice. And that encourages water vapor when it touches those bacteria to not just touch as water, but it begins to organize the water molecule into an organized crystal, and it encourages the growth of water crystals, ice. It also apparently has a way of lowering its own temperature artificially to even more encourage the formation of ice crystals on it. So why is it important for the bacteria to make ice crystals, to encourage ice crystal formation? Well, it's important because the bacteria has to break open the cell wall of the plant to get in there and feed. And that's what ice does. Ice breaks open cell walls of plants. Maybe you've seen a plant after a freeze and the leaves are all droopy and the plant falls over after a freeze, after a frost. Well, that's because the ice crystals broke open all those plant cells that were holding it up and it drooped over. So the bacteria encourages frost damage. And then it can go in and see all the black spots on this leaf? That's where we've got frost damage, and the bacteria has gone in and it's happy, it's feeding on the leaf. The bacteria wants to live, it needs to eat. That's how it eats. Frost damage to plants that are broken open, and it goes in there and it eats and it multiplies, and very, very happy bacteria when you get lots of ice. So you've got this bacteria over all these plants, especially in the Midwest. It loves corn. Here's a field of corn, and I don't know if you've ever been to Iowa, but the cornfields stretch on forever as far as the eye can see. It's amazing. Oceans of wheat and corn, and it's the nation's bread belt, corn belt, wheat belt. Well, when the wind blows on a summer day, that bacteria that's living on these plant leaves, a lot of it gets picked up by the wind, and it gets blown up and blown around and blown up into the sky. It's bacteria, it doesn't weigh anything, so it's floating around. It's floating around right now. So it's up in the sky, the bacteria. Now here's the problem for the bacteria. If it doesn't get back down onto the surface of a leaf so that it can feed, it's going to die. And the bacteria doesn't want to die. It has a life force. It wants to live and reproduce like every other organism on this planet, it seems. So the bacteria has been blown up into the sky. Now you've got a sky that is absolutely full of bacteria. In fact, studies now show that some of these thunderstorms, especially the ones that form over the Midwest of the U.S., in some of them, almost all the condensation nuclei to make the cloud and the rain comes from this bacteria. It's not dust at all. It's bacteria that the drops and the ice crystals are forming on, ice crystals. So in a developing storm, the faster you can get ice to form, that rapidly intensifies the growth of a storm and can quite quickly turn it into a thunderstorm. If you have ice forming in that storm, it very rapidly increases the condensation process. So if you've got bacteria up in this cloud that have that special ability, have that lattice formation on it that encourages water to not just condense as liquid water, but to then freeze much sooner than it normally would, you quite often will get a storm that grows much faster because it's full of bacteria. But the bacteria benefits from this because the more intense the storm, the heavier the rain, and the more rain and bacteria that get transported by the rain right back down to the ground, to the plants, so the bacteria gets redeposited back on the surface of those plant leaves, and it gets to continue to eat and feed and make ice and break open the plant cell walls and reproduce. But in the process, that bacteria, it appears, is responsible for not just creating rainstorms by giving it condensation nuclei for the raindrops to form on, but because it it raises the freezing level. Water freezes faster because that bacteria is up in that cloud. That intensifies the rain-making process. So because of its own ice crystal manufacturing, it's much more likely that the storm will produce rain, and the bacteria can ride in those raindrops right back down to the field of corn and get back to work feeding and living and going. It is an example of how these unlikely partners impact rain and weather across the United States and really across the planet. This bacteria sometimes goes way up and is transported, and it's been found all across the globe. It is a bacteria that helps to make rain. So Pseudomonas syringae, a most unlikely partner in making rain and thunderstorms. It is a bacterial condensation nuclei. It encourages ice crystals growth because of its own physical makeup. Perhaps it evolved that way. And it promotes rain. And it is carried back down on those raindrops back so it can feed on that crop of corn or wheat. And that's a little bit more about how bacteria can make it rain. So this is part one of three pieces I'm going to do about how these weird things are all connected. Tomorrow, I think we're going to talk about how when you eat dinner, you're actually eating sunshine. No, wait, you're actually eating gravity. No, wait, you're actually eating a bend in space-time. It's all connected, in theory. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then the other one, what's the other one I was going to talk about? The other weird one. I'll remember it tomorrow. But the next couple of days, we'll talk about weird stuff. Yes, Erica's reading your Facebook comments. Who's out there?
Misha.
Hi, Misha.
Misha's asking if you can see the bacteria.
No, you cannot. That's a great question. Misha wants to know, can you see that bacteria? Not unless you have a microscope. So let me back up. So these images, this bacteria, this is under very high magnification. This is probably we're 10,000 times normal to see a single-celled organism like the bacteria. So you cannot see it with the naked eye, but we can see it with a microscope. Great question.
Lane and Landon are tuning in. They're in the 4th grade from Santa Fe ISD.
Hello, Lane. Hello, Landon. Santa Fe ISD. Nice to see you guys today.
There was a question way up here. Dang it. Sorry, I lost it. There's a lot of ones. Someone was asking what the freezing point was.
It's a great question. So inside of a developing storm,
Misha asked this.
Misha wants to know about the freezing temperature, freezing levels inside of a storm. Let's talk a little bit about that. So when you have liquid water droplets, here's a liquid water droplet. Okay, it's condensed on a little piece of dust, maybe bacteria, and you've got a water droplet right here. I'm drawing it bigger than normal size. And it's liquid. And let's say, so the higher up you go in the cloud, in the atmosphere, the temperature in general drops. And let's say right here is the level at which it drops to 32 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the temperature at which water freezes. But it's not that simple. Liquid water drops can go above that level of 32. So now it's below 32 degrees. Let's say you go higher, and now we're at 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, we're 32 degrees colder than the freezing level. But even then, quite often, these water droplets can stay as liquid. It's called supercooled water droplets. The fastest way to get these water droplets to freeze and encourage more violent growth inside of a thunderstorm is to have them encounter an ice crystal. And so if you've got these bacteria, I'm drawing that piece of bacteria up here, that is very good at encouraging ice crystal growth artificially with the little lattice structure it has. to organize those water molecules into crystals, encouraging the growth of crystals. So when you get this thing with a little ice crystal forming on it, there's an ice crystal on it, these super cool raindrops, when they touch that ice crystal, they will immediately freeze. And you can imagine trillions of these bacterium up here encouraging trillions of ice crystals to form, intensifying the storm, and that's why the bacteria, this particular bacteria, is so fascinating when it comes to storm development. So when you've got this bacteria, sometimes you can even get ice at just a little bit above freezing. Sometimes they'll make ice at 33 degrees Fahrenheit. That's how good they are at making ice. And so that's why this bacteria is so important. And you can see how complicated the freezing level is in a storm. Water doesn't always freeze right when it gets below 32. Yes?
Gina asked if the bacteria can kill plants.
Hey, Gina. It wants to kill the plant. You bet it can. The bacteria wants that plant to be damaged. This is where the plant has been damaged by ice crystals, by freezing. And the bacteria found little holes in the cell wall, and they went in there and they ate on it. Now, I don't know if they want it to die. I mean, they need plants living. They need plants reproducing and growing so they can feed off of them. It's a symbiotic relationship, but they do great damage, and these bacteria can kill entire crops if they get out of hand. Yes?
Lane and Landon want to know if the bacteria is harmful to humans.
Hey, Lane and Landon. As far as my study into this, no, it's not. But remember, our bodies, we have this incredible system in our bodies called the immune system. And it is designed to fight off things like bacteria, some of which can harm us. There are types of bacteria out there that if they get into us and it gets out of control, it can harm us. So we have this immune system. the boogers in your nose, okay, the snot, that's designed, that's there to capture things like bacteria. When you breathe in, it sticks to it, right? It's sticky. And then sometimes you blow your nose or you spit it out and out it goes before it even has a chance to get into your body. That's just one part of your incredible immune system. But the short answer is no, it doesn't.
Elizabeth wants to know, is there bacteria on the plants when you eat them?
I would imagine there would be. So yeah, there is. Let's just go with yes. So Alyssa asked that question? Elizabeth wanted to know if there's bacteria on plants when you eat them, like the lettuce in your salad. I would imagine that yes, even if you wash it, there's some bacteria on it. There's bacteria all over the place. Okay, there's bacteria on, it's on the screen, it's on my hands, it's everywhere. But our bodies are designed to handle it. We're fine. We've got this immune system, and it most of the time takes care of it just fine. Obviously, there are some bacteria that you want to be very, very careful with, food, handling food and raw meat and that type of thing. You need to ask your parents about being safe from that because that's the type of thing you do want to take precautions with. But most of this bacteria, like on plants, there's not enough of it and our immune system handles it. That was a long answer. Anything else, Erica?
Not really.
All right. Well, listen, guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for joining. I really love this special bacteria, this Pseudomonas syringae. It's just fascinating to me that this single-celled organism has this microscopic structure on it, this lattice, that helps to encourage the formation of ice crystals so it can eat plants, because it doesn't have a mouth, it doesn't have a knife. It needs ice to do its dirty work. But that ice crystal formation encourages storms to grow and help them get back down and get back on a plant leaf and live on. All right, that's a lesson for today. Tomorrow, I'm pretty sure we're going to talk about how the food you eat is all connected to one thing in particular. It's going to be another weird one. I'll see you tomorrow at 2.